Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat here with you. Jim Coyle. Dustin Dopirak joins us from Indianapolis. How are you, sir?
Doing well, Jim. About yourself?
I cannot complain. You have to be happy. The draft is over, so now you can just report on what there is, and there's not a lot other than the fallout and the summer league to come up, which I cannot wait for the summer league. It has become more and more. It's like watching a tournament in and of itself because these guys are playing for their lives. Some of them, or a lot of them, most of them. You've got the announcement that Trayce Thompson's getting a shot with the New York Knicks on their summer league team. There will be, if you're an Indiana Hoosier fan, you'll have three guys to watch with Trayce Jackson-Davis on the Golden State Warriors, and of course Jalen Hood-Schifino with the Lakers. And I'm assuming he'll play as well just to get the experience that he needs. I mean, I assume all these freshmen, rookies, you use the different terminology. Rookies will play. And then you have Oscar Tshiebwe, who signs a two-way with the Pacers, which is very interesting. We were talking about this earlier, Dustin, they passed on Trayce Jackson-Davis twice, and obviously he wasn't happy about it. And they take a guy who is very similar in skill set, but I have to think that they broke these guys down, and whatever it was, there was something about Oscar Tshiebwe that stood out, made him different.
No, the reason was Oscar Tshiebwe was willing to
not close.
No, I mean the really big issue, the key piece on all of this, and I even said this when he was starting. Maxine's got a lot of thoughts.
Disagreed. She was late to tell me that I was wrong.
Yeah. Hold on a minute. Let me get out so she can. She's not totally overwhelming me here. The really key issue with Trayce was the two-way, and that's the biggest thing that everybody's got to remember about this was that basically the Pacers traded down to 47 in the first place because they were already in kind of a roster crunch. So they've got 12 guys coming back on contract. I think they want to try to sign at least one of them. I think they are interested in trying to bring back George Hill. And so that basically meant they could bring back, they could sign two rookies to not be on two-way contracts, that they would have roster space for two of those if they want to keep one roster spot open for the time being. So they traded down to 47 in part because once you get past about 45, it's easier to get somebody on a two-way. You can sign anybody in the second round to a two-way, but somebody that's at 33, 34, 35, their agent's going to be like, you don't have to take a two-way. You don't have to spend any time in the G League. You're one of the 35 best players, in this draft. You shouldn't have to take a two-way. So they knew going in that basically they were trading back in part so that's what they could get. They could get somebody on a two-way contract so they could, have them get some time in the G League. So number one, they needed to do that for roster purposes to start with. Number two, the Pacers view Trayce Jackson-Davis as a center. They also view Oscar Tshiebwe as a center. And they have four of those guys in the roster already. Miles Turner being the starter, Jalen Smith, Isaiah Jackson, Daniel Tice. Those guys were taking up, they already had an issue with playing time among those guys as it was. So even last year, they had a hard time making sure that Jalen Smith and Isaiah Jackson got the time that they needed to be able to develop. And it was an issue really for, Daniel Tice only played 7 games, and that was a deal, because Jackson and Smith had to take DNPs just to get him any kinds of minutes, for the 7 games he played, which basically was just for the purpose of saying, hey, this guy's still a useful player. So somebody should trade us for him because he'll be helpful to your team as a backup center. Daniel Tice is still useful, but they basically told him after about 7-8 games, like, hey, we're going to focus on getting Jalen and Isaiah minutes. You're going to just piece for the rest of the time. And that was a totally useful basketball player who didn't really play the last, month and a half of the season. So they've already got a major issue with the 5, and they view Trayce as a 5. So when it comes around, as I understand it, and I guess Greg Doyle got somebody on his team to say this, and I also got Chad Buchanan to say this, that basically they were like, hey, well, we would be interested in taking you if you're willing to take a two-way. And Trayce and his agent were basically like, no, we're not up for that. And number one, number two, we see your roster situation anyway. You're not going to have any options. So, but Oscar Tshiebwe then, so they let Trayce go, don't pick him with the 47 and the 55, and then he goes to 57, where Golden State's got a great situation for him. They don't have a lot of big bodies on that team, and they could really use somebody that can take those minutes and play. So he ended up with a much better situation. He'd have been it would not have been a good scenario if Indiana would have taken him. But again, the biggest key thing is they would have been willing to take him on a two-way. I think there would be value to Trayce Jackson-Davis on a two-way. I understand why he wouldn't want one, because he's like, hey man, I've been an All-American. Why do I need to take a two-way? That's BS. But on the flip side of it, the reason that he would not have space on the Pacers roster is because they view him as a center. And that's what everybody views him as at this point, as a small ball five, because he has not proven he can do a lot of the things that you need to do as a power forward in this league. At this point, the power forward this league now is what small forward used to be 10, 15 years ago. It's obviously become a more perimeter oriented game. Like Jason Tatum's a 4, Jimmy Butler's a 4. It's not the league where Tim Duncan and Karl Malone are your four guys with their back to the basket now. Like, guys that are practically guards are nominally your power forwards. Like, those guys are you either have to guard them, or you have to cross match. So you got to prove that you can defend on the perimeter, you can handle on the perimeter, and you can shoot. And Trayce Jackson-Davis has only taken 3 shots. So he can still be, I think he can be a really good small ball 5 in this league. You don't have to be as big as you used to be a good center. And so I think he's got a future, but Indiana has 4 centers. And so it's like, okay, like the only way that he was going to get playing time is to become a power forward. And that's what I think the G League could do for him. It's not that he can't learn it or doesn't understand it. Like, he's got to go someplace and shoot. And he's only going to do that if he feels like it's the right call. And he would have to go someplace where the games don't matter. And I've been saying this for a long time. Like, a big reason why Trayce never shot threes is he always felt like all the games mattered. Every possession mattered. So why would he waste a possession taking a shot that he's only going to make 30% of the time? And if he's lucky, if he could go down on the block and score 65% of the time. That was his calculation. He basically said it. So it's like, if he's ever going to be a three-point shooter and do the things you need to do to be a power forward in the NBA, he needs to go someplace where he's not only allowed, but demanded to shoot and told, it doesn't matter if you miss. We want you to take as many threes as you can. We don't care if we win this game. And so, there would have been value, I think, for him taking a two-way. He didn't want one. That's fine. And he got in a better situation. But the Pacers then, like, the reason why it makes sense for them to go then take Oscar Tshiebwe is they could put Oscar Tshiebwe on a two-way. Oscar Tshiebwe is going to spend a lot of time with the Mad Ants this year, and so he gets called up only if they need him. Oscar's, Trayce is a better all-around player, but Oscar's a better rebounder, so it's like he's got like one skill that's going to be ahead of his. He was the nation's leading rebounder each of the last 2 years. He was just a phenomenal rebounder. So there's value there in just sort of having one skill that really stands out above the rest of them. But that's the biggest thing. Like, the two-way is really the biggest way. You have to understand that. I was surprised they didn't take him, but I said that on the idea of, well, you can get him on a two-way now. But if he wasn't willing to do that, it's a different calculation. I saw this logjam play out all year, last year. And, I know people are probably going to say, well, he's better than Jalen Smith and Isaiah Jackson. I think he's a better all-around player than they are, but they each have something that they're better at than him. Like, Isaiah Jackson's a higher leaper, like as high as Trayce gets up, Isaiah Jackson gets up higher, like I watched them all year. Like, he gets down, any lob you throw at him, the guy can throw down, like anything. And like Trayce is really good at that. Isaiah's at next level at that. Like, it's crazy. And Jalen Smith, he's got his flaws, and they had to move him away from power forward because he wasn't doing a lot of the things that you need to do. But he's still a more accomplished shooter. He hit 51 threes in college. Trayce Jackson-Davis didn't hit any. And Jalen had a good stretch last season, the 21-22 season where he really shot a lot. And he averaged 11 rebounds per 36 minutes this year. And he was actually, like, per minute basis, better rebounder than Miles Turner. So those guys still have something they can give you. They're not going to like give Trayce the job and just sort of cast those guys aside. Like, each of them are just going to steal minutes from each other. That's what would happen, is everybody's development would be taken down because they would try to make all of them play, and everybody would get hurt. This way, Trayce goes to Golden State. He's in a great situation. Like, all they've really got as far as bigs, presuming they let JaMychal Green walk, which I presume they will. He's really he could be the backup 5, at least for the regular season. Obviously they play small in the playoffs where they go, Looney is the starting 5 a lot of times, and then Green is the starting 5. and play a smaller lineup. But, you have to operate differently in the regular season when you got to get through 82 games, 48 minutes a night. You're not, like nobody's getting more than 30 when you're playing closer to 40 in playoff minutes. Like you got to find somebody to play 18-ish after, and Trayce can be that guy who plays 18 at the 5 behind Kevon Looney, and give them a real rebounding option, and his style of play fits. They let you pass, they let you create as a big man. So I mean, everything worked out for him. Everybody's better off in this scenario, and I understand why everybody's upset, because I mean, there is, we were talking about this on our podcast. It's just like, it really comes down to, like, the people in the state want to be able to root for you for your entire career. They want you to play your high school ball here, your college ball here, your pro ball here, and they want to be able to care about you the whole way. And that's cool, and that's great, and that's why we have the readership we have, and the listeners that you have, and everything else. So, like, I don't want to disparage that, but that's not always what works right for an NBA team. And the bottom line is the Pacers are better off, and Trayce Jackson-Davis is significantly better off with the situation being what it is.
And getting more of these guys in, the league is kind of, we've talked about the style of play that has changed a little bit. With getting more of these guys in, do you think that, because the NBA is a flavor and not everybody likes it. It's not
Sure.
It's a dish not everybody likes. But when you start getting more guys that have been more recently played at a school like, say, Indiana, I'm wondering if those people are going to follow them to the NBA to watch them.
You mean, are they going to keep on them?
As a fan, no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, like, think about, there's a couple of different ways to think about this. Like, obviously, if you were to have a scenario in this state where, there's a kid's a superstar high school player, and he goes to IU and he's a superstar there, and then he gets drafted by the Pacers and he's a star there. Like, is that going to lead to more interest in the Pacers? Yes, absolutely, because this is a very, like, parochial state. Like, everybody really cares about, I mean, they believe in their basketball as something like they feel like they invented. So they absolutely want to see a scenario where there's a guy like that comes through the ranks of Indiana and proves to everybody how great Indiana basketball is, not just IU, but like the state of basketball in Indiana. Right. And that produces somebody who's a superstar, and he comes to the Pacers and everybody goes to see him. Like, yeah, there's something to that. The issue.
What about with these other teams when they go to, like, the Lakers and the Golden
State? Are they going to care? Like, I mean, you've seen, obviously, over time, people come back and watch guys who were IU guys, and they get, they get big ovations. But, like, is it a scenario where, okay, well, that game sells out? I mean, like, sort of. I mean, like, Trayce is going to draw well his first time back. Like, when the Warriors come to play, I mean, they'll already draw well because everybody wants to see Curry. Like those games, like there's like a handful of superstars that, really move the needle here, where it's like, okay, like, and they spend a lot of that day just afraid that he's not going to play, like, I mean, like I got calls from friends be like, hey, is Steph going to play today? Because if he is, I want to bring my kid. If I don't, then I don't. I want to see, I want, because some of these guys are marvels, and you want to be in the building when they play. And obviously you have this issue with load management and everything like that. That sometimes sometimes you get them and sometimes you don't.
Ask Archie Miller about load management.
Was that? Yeah.
Ask Archie Miller about load management.
It's a different deal when you're only playing 32 than when you're playing 82. And he knows that. I think that was part of the deal. Was like, we play 32 games. Our guys can play. They're 21. It's different when they're playing 82. But anyway, point of the matter.
The wife waved. She waved.
she says hi. And so does Maxine. But there are all those issues and everything like that. But like people will show up the first couple times that an IU guy comes to play. They will. I mean, when Cody Zeller plays, when Victor Oladipo plays, there is a tick up as far as those games are concerned. It's obviously an issue if they play less, and I think there would have been an issue at home if like I know the first. I was there for Grace Berger's first game and she didn't get in, and it was a deal. And so it becomes a deal that you have to manage. It's sort of like when an in-state kid or a Bloomington kid comes to play at Indiana at IU, that there's this sort of pressure, from the locals that like, well, you got to play the kid. He's the local kid. And, so it puts pressure on coaches to be like, okay, well, what if that's not the right call here? You know, like, do I have to, you know, decide who to play? It's almost like you have 10,000 parents, you know, showing up. Like, there's something to that of feeling like, okay, well, I have to play this town's kid. And it's just like, well, what if that's not the right move for my basketball team? You know, and so that is an issue. And I was really thinking about this. Like, I don't know that there's another pro franchise that would have this kind of pressure. Like, I mean, the as far as that particular type, like, I don't know that anybody, I mean, there was legit anger on Thursday night that showed up in my mentions when they didn't pick Trayce. I mean, it was a deal. I mean, like, there was one, I had one, like, you know, Twitter follower who said, like, disband the franchise. This place is a joke. They hate their fans. I'm like, that's a bit much.
They did what was best for them. I said this earlier. I go, it's professional sports. It's a business, people. And Trayce ended up in a much, much better position.